Hello, my name is Lee Bartlett, and I am the president of Psi Beta, and I am pleased to welcome you here tonight for this lively topic. Tonight we will be hearing Tales from a Mortician, Letting You Down is What We Do by Frank Lambert. Uh, Frank Lambert runs family burial and cremation in Mesa, Arizona, with his wife of 32 years, Lisa. He attended the University of Utah and Webster State University. He graduated with a bachelor's in nursing. He then moved to California to attend a mortuary science program at Cypress College, where he received several awards from his school and surrounding organizations. After passing all of his boards, he became the youngest licensed funeral director and embalmer in California. Now he's been working for nearly 40 years in the industry and has found joy in helping thousands of people. So without further ado, tonight's speaker, Frank Lambert.
Thank you very much. Nice round. Okay. I hope that, let me just start by seeing a show of hands, and I'm going to talk for a little bit. I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you actually know a funeral director? Good. Oh, I expected no one to raise their hand. Okay, I'm going to pretend that I didn't see it. Okay, I'm kidding you. Go ahead. Oh, you as well? Okay, thank you. Hopefully tonight you'll know another one, me, and I hope that we can become friends, and actually that if you have any questions towards the end of the lecture, that you will go ahead and ask me those questions. Second, how many of you have experienced, just by show of hands, a death of a close loved one or friend? Perfect, and that's exactly what I expected. So thank you. The national average, just so you know, for someone passing away close to you is age 21. So by the time you're 21 years old, you will have experienced death of a close relative or friend. That's interesting to me. Okay, let me start by sharing with you a story. It's kind of embarrassing in a way, but it kind of lets you know a little bit about what takes place within the funeral industry. I got my major start in California, and then I was transferred, or at least moved, got a better business opportunity or job opportunity in Salt Lake, Utah, and so I moved there. The company that I was working for had older equipment, and when I'm talking older equipment, I'm talking about hearses that are not necessarily the best condition. So a hearse is a vehicle that carries a casket from point A to point B, whether it be from a church service to the cemetery. In this particular instance, in the Salt Lake Cemetery, has anyone ever been to that cemetery? It's 13 acres larger than Disneyland, just so you know the size and scope of it. But to get to that cemetery, you have to actually go up an incline of a hill, and that hill is probably one of the worst hills in Salt Lake, especially when it's inclement weather. This particular occasion, that road had small pebbles on it, and so it made kind of hard for the car to make it up that incline. Cars are heavy, and so we didn't really think there'd be much problem with it. But as we started going up the hill, all of a sudden, as we started up the hill, we hear it, and I look in the back, and sure enough, that casket had shifted. That meant that in the back of that car, there's pivot pins, and you put the pins right in the back of by the casket so that the casket doesn't shift back and forth. It shifted, hit the door. Okay, so we continue up a little bit more, and all of a sudden we had to stop because there was someone in front of us that had stopped. The rocks and pebbles caused the road car to start to roll back. So we got to a blank spot in the road, or where there was no pebbles, and slammed on the brakes. Again, that casket hit that door, only this time the door opened. So as the door opened, that casket flew out of the car. And across the street from right where we were, there's a pharmacy. Yeah, okay, good. And so the casket hits the rocks that are on the road to help traction. It helped his traction. And he continues down this hill. So the casket hits the curb, flips, and I mean, literally goes right into the front door of the pharmacy. So we're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, what now? It gets better. The casket opens. And the deceased comes out of the casket. And at that very moment, my companion and I are sitting there and we're kind of shocked. And the deceased says, hey, have you got anything to stop this coffin? Okay, all right, good. Whew. None of that ever happened. Okay, it was all a joke. But I just wanted you to know that there are so many different experiences that take place within the funeral industry that you would only know it if someone like me was standing here to tell you. And so when we talk about this evening, a little bit about what takes place in my life and what has actually transpired, I'm going to hopefully enlighten you just a little bit, maybe teach you something, and allow you to understand a little bit more about what takes place with individuals that suffer the loss of a loved one. I think it's important that we start by talking a little bit about 5 stages of grief. Does anyone know them? Okay, I'm seeing heads. I know we're not to the point where we're answering questions or anything. Just yell them out, will you? Denial. Anger. What? Okay, bargaining. I call it bargaining. Okay, go ahead. What else? Depression. Acceptance. Thank you very much. So along with depression or acceptance, I also include the word hope. Because I think it's important that people understand that regardless of what you may be experiencing or what you may be going through, there's always hope. At least I believe that it is. So my story. What brought me here? So when I was 3, my parents divorced, and they had been married for 27, 28 years. And I remember on one occasion, my father was a concert violinist. And so whenever we would go to bed at night, we would be serenaded by his violin. And that's what would serenade us to sleep, calm us down, and get us ready for bed. After that divorce took place, we no longer had that experience, excepting for times when we were able to visit with him in his new home. On one occasion, see you later. And he worked for the state of Utah. And on one morning, particularly, I just remember specifically and vividly him waving and then receiving a phone call later that day that he had died on an operating table. And I remember thinking, and I remembered the lady that he was with at the time screaming, no, 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 and then just dropping the phone. So here I am, 9 years old at this point, and I'm thinking to myself, what the heck just happened? And then we find out that my father had passed away. So plans were made. We weren't part of that, but plans were made. The funeral was set. We went to the funeral. As we went to the funeral, I remember the viewing, and I remember as a 9-year-old looking at my father's mouth and thinking to myself, what's that shiny thing in his mouth? And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that spurred an interest in me that I guess I've just never been able to let go. So throughout the funeral, the next day was the actual funeral itself. And I remember thinking, I have a twin brother. And I remember sitting next to him and we were listening to all these stories about my dad. And then we looked at each other and without hesitation, both looked at each other and said, did we even know Dad? Because of the stories being told by people that he worked with were not stories that I knew from my father or about my father. So anyway, that's how I kind of got interested in that. And then went on through nursing and decided that I would try and go into nursing school, get into medical school. Life just had a different path for me. And so once I got into Cypress College, clipped it fairly fast, and then just decided to go ahead and stay in the industry. So my my story is probably not unique, but each of you have probably had the same type of experience or story when you've suffered the loss of a loved one. And when I say if you've suffered the loss of a loved one, that's what I mean. There's someone that you love, someone that you've cared about, someone that you've associated with probably on a day-to-day basis, and all of a sudden they're gone. How do you feel that void? What next? What do we do? So let me go back to the story about the thing in the mouth. As you guys are sitting there listening to me, I want you to pay specific attention to what's happening with your jaws, your upper and lower jaw. What's happening? Is it tight like that? Or is there a gap? Which is it? It's a gap. Number one complaint whenever there's a viewing, the mouth doesn't look good. And so when you tighten a mouth to close it, whether it be by needles, a needle injector, that's what I was seeing, that silver string or that silver nail, pull it together. They pound a nail, just so you know, pound a nail here, just kind of twist those wires together to make that tight so the mouth doesn't open. So if you're too tight, it can look like this. If it's too loose, it can look like where there's a little bit of a gap in the lips. But if it's just right, you'll know how it is because, and I always do this when I embalm. I always pause for a moment, and I think for a moment, okay, how's my mouth feeling right now? And then I want that deceased to feel the same way. That's how I measure the mouth. And I feel like I'm a pretty good embalmer. And having done it for close to 40 years, as was mentioned, there's almost everything, nothing you could imagine that I haven't seen. And so I just want you to think for a moment, again, so have you ever gone to a viewing where someone has had an incredible, terrible death? Have you ever thought about that? And is the casket going to be open? Probably not. I think it all depends on the type of person that's actually doing the work. But there's certain things you can do as an individual, as an embalmer, in making sure that person, if they want to have an open casket, to where they actually can. So I want you to do a little experiment with me. I want you to take your fingers right like this. I'm just going to put from the inner canthus of your eye to the outer side. And just kind of pull it away from your face and just kind of keep it as close as you can. Now I want you to take that size, and I'm going to put it right across the bridge of your nose. Is it the same? Yeah, it's the same. You take that same bridge of your nose, you're going to put it twice on your mouth, and that's the size of your mouth. See, now we've taken one feature right here. Now if you take that same thing, take your fingers now from the base of your nose to the tip, or the bridge of your nose here, or the base of your nose here, and then just run it right to your ear. It's the same. You see how features can be built? Yeah, it's amazing. If you just take the time to do it. And that's the problem. A lot of people don't like to take that time. I had one part in my life where I was actually called upon to actually travel the nation in building individual spaces so that they can have an open casket viewing. So usually gunshot wounds, sometimes stabbings, decapitations. So anyway, that's my story. That's how I got here. And one of the greatest blessings I think that has ever entered my life is the ability to interact with you. You're the one I'm most concerned about, not the deceased. You. Because you end up surviving, bringing that story forward. You're the one that's most important. I heard statistics today about 57% of high school students right now feel like they don't belong in society. Think about that for just a minute. 57%. And you can tell where I'm going with this. 30% thought about suicide this last year. Does that tell you anything about what's happening in our society today? We need interaction. I'm sorry, what is your name again? What is it? Danny? Okay. So when I was trying to find the building here, I had a nice conversation with Danny. I think it was nice, right? Coming in, laughing and joking. That's what humankind is all about. The ability to actually interact with other people. And that, for me, is the most important thing and aspect of this business. Backroom work, it's okay, but it's not the most important. So let's talk a little bit about the funeral site itself. And so when I started in 1985, I remember sitting around in the office with my other employee or with other employees, and we heard the most rare term ever. You know what the term was? Cremation. We sat and laughed about cremation. No one will ever want their loved one burned. No, it's not going to happen. No, we'll continue burying. You thought about that? When you heard the term cremation, some of you that are a little older, when that term came out, oh my gosh, were you kind of fearful of it? Maybe thinking a little bit about saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that anyone would do a cremation. Yeah, we're going to talk about it. It's right now in Arizona. So you know, we're 72% cremation. Yeah. That's a high number, isn't it? 72%. So and now I'm going to be honest with you. When I take calls at the mortuary, I immediately think cremation. And that's probably the wrong thing to think because, oh no, every once in a while, maybe 1 in 500, get a call saying, hey, no, we don't want to cremate, we want to bury. Oh, geez. Okay, yeah. And then you're starting to change your whole frame of mind. But you don't hear about burial very much anymore, unless they're burying cremated remains. So let's talk a little bit about these types of cremation here. Let's start with flame. That is the most basic. And that is what started back in I think it was 79, actually, when cremation came around. So when that happened, and let me see if I've got a slide here. I think I do. Of the old style. Okay. This is an outside pyre. And so are any of you familiar with pyres? A pyre itself is something that here in the States, they frown upon. But there is a state that is allowing it to actually run legally, and that's in Colorado. They have outside pyres. Otherwise, reservations, Indian reservations will allow pyres to take place. So, but in our communities, no. But this gives you an idea. This is in India. This gives you an idea about an outside pyre. Usually it's not this big or elaborate, but usually individuals are placed on metal stilts with the wooden beds. And then that's when the cremation takes place, or when the actual process is taking place itself. So let's go ahead. I want to go to one more here. Maybe I can find it. Okay. This right here is the old style crematories. You got caskets on the left, caskets on the right. This right here is what's called a retort. And this is the area in which the casket is actually placed. And it's not always a casket. Sometimes it's just a cardboard box that the individual is placed into for the cremation. The old style crematories, like this one here, will have one jet of flame that comes down here, and they're fueled by two different sources. It can either be propane or it can be natural gas. But they have a flame that comes off the top here, and if you were to look inside this chamber and run your vision down the side of this wall here, there'd be another opening or hole. And that allows, you have catalytic converters on your car where the exhaust is burned twice. That's what's happening here. So this this gap right here has another chamber which allows the flame or the exhaust to be pushed up and burned once again. Let me tell you a little story about about cremation. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? I mean, seriously, when you're in a classroom, when you're walking down the street, when you're driving, you feel like someone's watching you? Okay, I'm going to share a story with you. Thank you. An exorbitant nod. Yes, oh, thank you. I want you to come up here and show them. So I'm going to share a story with you about a cremation that took place that truly gave me reason to think and maybe even caused me to fear just a little bit. And we have, and I'm not going to, the names I'm going to give you are not real names, so I don't want anyone to try and go home and Google a Google search. But this particular mortuary on about 60th Avenue in Thomas called me and said, "Hey, Frank, we have an individual that we need cremated." Okay, I'll get there sometime this afternoon. No, we need you here within the hour. Can you do it? I said, "Yeah, I guess." So I booked my way, drop everything, head to this location, and I walked into the area, the receiving area, where the individuals that are actually boxed are waiting to be cremated. And I walk in and I said, "Okay, so what's the hurry?" And he said, "We need this one to go right now. I don't care about the others. That one needs to go." So I go walking over to the box, and on the box is drawn out a pentagram. And the pentagram itself, I just thought, that's interesting. And he said, "Let us help you load." They wanted her out. So I said, okay. So we load her into the van, and I'm heading towards the crematory. All of a sudden, the hair on my arms started to stand. The hair on the back of my neck started to stand. And I immediately looked to my rearview mirror to see what was happening behind me. In the back of the van, someone was watching me. No, don't take me wrong as far as someone sitting up and watching me, but you get the feeling that someone's watching me. So I just tried to blow it off, tried not to think much about it, and continued driving to the crematory. The whole time doing what I learned in driving school, checking my rearview mirror almost every 13 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. What's going on back there? So I couldn't get her to the crematory fast enough. And I began to understand what they were talking about. So I unloaded her, had one machine that was open, immediately put her in the chamber. Now on the chamber, or on the retorts, there's this little device up here. This is old style, so it's not going to be up to date like what I'm about to describe to you. But it has LED readings, temperature readings. And most cremations will happen between 1800 and 2100 degrees. That's hot. And so most crematories, just so you know, can burn about 2 pounds a minute. And so if you, hey, how long will it take my mom, who's 345 pounds, to cremate? Let's see, 345 divided by 2, that's 50, 60, well, about 2 hours and 30 minutes. You know what I mean? That's how you come to that, how long it's going to actually take someone to be cremated. That's what's happening here. So this lady was small. And unfortunately, the chamber was cold. And so I had to warm the chamber up. Can't start a cremation before the chamber reaches at least 800 degrees. So I had to warm the chamber up, and I waited and I waited and I waited, hooray, bam. Hit the button, cremation started. But is it? Not quite. So as I continued with the other machines, we had 4 machines. So as I continue working with the other machines, I come back and check on this machine. Oh, okay, good. So she has risen to the temperature of 1800 degrees. Perfect. That's right where you want her. That's cremation's going well. Continue working around, come back. Oh, it's dropped to 1600. Okay, that's all right. That's good too. And as I'm sitting there watching it, rises to 1666. Now, before I continue on, you people, what do you mean you people? No, you guys, well, you probably won't believe what I'm about to tell you, but I swear it's true. So I watched it at 1666. Okay, good. It's raising again, and that's normal throughout the course because once the tissue starts pulling away, once the viscera starts to burn, it's a greasy fire. That's what it is. And so that temperature is going to rise. And so as I watched it rise, I go, whatever. And I walked away and I come back. It had risen to 1680, come back and it's back to 1666. And I just sat there and I watched it. And I sat there and looked at that temperature. 20 minutes had gone by, still 1666. And I took my finger and I tapped the LED thinking that something was wrong with my machine. The completion of the cremation stopped. The machine shuts down, but at 1666 is when that ended. And usually it's down to 1280 when a cremation ends. So what was that? I don't know. Then the kicker is the family wanted a long bone. You know why people want bones? I don't. I wish I could tell you. No, there are certain religions that want it. But anyway, that was for me, an interesting experience. So when I put the next cremation in, I watched that LED dial specifically to see if it would change and fluctuate. And it did. And it worked just fine. So I can't really understand exactly what took place. I have my ideas, but I can't, that's just me. So anyway, so the cremation goes in. The newer ones will have jets of fume or of flame that come out the sides here. Makes the cremation much more quick and efficient. So, okay, that's an old style there, much nicer today. And they all have conveyors that help with the casket going into the chamber. Okay. Let's go over here. This is what cremated remains look like after the cremation. When the cremation is complete, all you really have are bone. It's bone fragment. Everyone gets confused thinking there's still tissue and stuff. No, this is bone. And it's put into a processor. It's like a big processor. It's got a rotating blade on the bottom of it, and it pulverizes that bone to a fine powder. And that's what families receive back. So these are items that probably no one ever sees unless you're in the funeral industry. But this is what's called a collecting tray. There's also what's called cooling trays. And the cremated remains are actually placed inside of a cooling tray and then set on the floor by some breezeway to allow cremated remains to cool fast. They're hot. They are hot when they come out of that retort. So anyway, that's that process there with regards to the cremated remains. Let's go back to cremation. What happens with cremated remains? Okay, I'm going to share with you an experience of today, what took place. So a family came in, wanted her husband cremated. Okay, what would you like done with the cremated remains? Don't care. So by that you mean scatter, bury? You want to take them? Nope. I meant I don't care. And I said, so what do you want done? She goes, you could flush them down the toilet if you wanted. Okay, this is what we're dealing with. And see, you guys, this is mainly psychology majors. What do you do when you start talking to someone who's in that frame of mind? Oh, yeah, okay, sure, we do that all the time. Yeah. No, we don't. So it's interesting that people's perspectives on their loved ones, how they want them treated after they pass away. I know families that treat their cremated remains of a dog, better than what she just asked me to do. So I think it's interesting that and I see that as a declination of our society. and where we're actually headed. And I think it's sad. It's a sad commentary. Anyway, so once that happens, so there's different dispositions with cremated remains. You can have them buried. You can have them placed in an urn, have them buried at a local cemetery. You can actually bury them on your property. You can actually go ahead and scatter them. If you scatter them, they always say, just don't do it below a watershed table. Does anyone know where those are? I don't either. When they say, yeah, I have to legally say, just don't spread them around a watershed. What's that? I just fulfilled the law. I just told you not to scatter at a watershed. And then the other option is to go ahead and keep them at home. And then just decide what you're going to do with them later. So I think it's interesting for me anyway to actually see the different spots that people want to scatter. And when we scatter, we take them to the chapel in the Rock and Spillman. And that's where we'll scatter our loved ones that want to be scattered up there. If they don't care, we'll scatter in them. There's an orange grove right off of Greenfield and Broadway that we will scatter there. The owner there allows us to do that as well. So all necessary paperwork, everything has to be signed before you can do anything like that. Okay, let's move on here. Has anyone heard of aquamation? It's the newest thing out there for green cremation. They call it green cremation because it's all water-based. The way this happens is an individual up to 7 foot long is placed into this chamber here. I've noticed here on this floor, kind of looks like water, right? I thought that was funny when my wife pulled the photo. I thought, look at the floor, it looks like water. But anyway, so the body would be placed into that metal chamber, and then it fills, there's a certain amount of Y and potassium that's mixed with the water. And then that chamber will rock and warm up. And so once that chamber is warm to a certain degree, I don't know that much about it, but this is a new type of disposal that is on the market right now. It's pretty popular, I guess, in California. But this right here is, and the one thing they're touting about this is that the water's potable afterward, meaning that they use it to water their properties. They wouldn't drink it, you can't drink it, but the water is still usable for something else. And so this is one of those options that families would have if they wanted. And so it's very interesting to me to see the different ways that people are coming up with to satisfy a green quota. This, however, once the cremation is done and all the tissue has been dissolved, you still have bone that's wet. So then what do? You burn it. You see the problem there? See? And so you guys are snickering too. And I read on this, I'm just like, oh my gosh. So you're taking away the tissue and everything to the bone, but then you still have to burn it to just warm it up, or you put it outside. But most environments aren't conducive to that. You can't set bones outside dry. So anyway, so I guess it helps to have a crematory gas fired next to it, so that can help. Anyway, let's see. So you can see here the drain pipes here. We are regulated by air quality. This is not. Guess who regulates this? Dry cleaning. Yeah, because the chemicals used, it's the dry cleaning agency that will regulate that. They take tempers, or they take the measurements and make sure that the pH and acidic levels are all within reason in order to be dispelled. Oh boy, yeah, okay. Interesting on that anyway, so at least it's opening your eyes to something else that's available. Aquamation. Let me go back here. Let me just make sure that I addressed everything. Okay. Let's jump just a little bit towards. Yeah, can you bring me one? Thanks, Mia. Professor Paul. Is it Professor Paul? Okay, sorry. So let's jump to funerals for just a minute. Thank you. When you go to funerals, what's the main thing you go to a funeral for? And I know that we're in the lecture part, so questions, if you have a question about it later, please ask me. But the main reason for a funeral is to remember the deceased and allowing you an opportunity to grieve while you remember the deceased. Remember the stages of grief we talked about? First of all, denial. Let me just walk you through something that happens occasionally more than we like. If a person passes away at home, and we go everywhere, we'll go to accident scenes, homes, hospitals, hospice care facilities. But if you go in there and there's family there, you can tell generally where someone has passed away because they're yelling. No, this can't be happening. You see the denial part? Yeah. I was in this, and then we're going to talk a little bit about anger here in just a minute. But the denial part is one that you have to, if they're actually vocalizing like that, you tread on very thin water. You're very careful about what you say, what you do, because you don't want them to hit you. Again, you don't want them to scream at you, because that becomes an embarrassing moment as well. Especially if you're in a hospice facility and everyone's yelling and they're yelling at you, who's there to do your job. So, yeah, you just want to try and be as cautious and as careful as possible. So, excuse me just a moment. Right now. So, when you start talking with a family, and I learned this very early in my career, words mean something. So let me just throw a couple of phrases at you and see what you think. A wife may say, "Hey, did you pick up any of my husband's belongings? You know, when we went and picked up your husband's body, there was nothing that we were given to bring back with him." See anything wrong with that? What? Body? Is he a body? Yeah, he's a body. But the words mean something to the family. He's still their loved one. It doesn't mean that you're taking something that is no longer an animate object. They still mean something. So better to say, you know, when we brought Peter into our care, nothing was handed to us by the hospital staff allowing us to bring that with us. See the difference? Yeah. So do you think about, and now let's push it into your normal day, everyday conversation. What do you say that could be offensive? What could you say that could be different, allowing that gap to be bridged? So I'm going to share something with you regarding anger. So I was at a funeral. It's my job. And I was up at the front getting ready to close a casket when I heard heavy footsteps. "Don't you dare touch her!" You know, and okay, if this is the casket, I'm like this and I freeze because I'm getting ready to close the lid. So I freeze and I'm thinking, what in the heck is going on here? And all of a sudden, this heavier set woman muscles her way to my side and then pushes me out of the way. And when I regained my composure and then started back towards the casket where I needed to close it, she said, "You're not touching my mother." Okay. First of all, she's already been touched. Okay? And I'm just going to be speaking honestly with you here. In my mind, this is what's happening. She's already been touched. She's obviously dead. She's in a casket. We're ready to move to the cemetery. What do you mean I'm not touching your mother? That's all an internal conversation. Nothing's been spoken. But I'm looking at her, and instead, yeah, when you're ready, we'll move forward. See the difference? Yeah. Intimate contact, hugging. People are shying away from hugging anymore. I'm a hugger. I love to hug. And if I have the opportunity to, and people, and you can read someone almost immediately if they're a hugger or not. But if they are, I'm going to take advantage of it. And it just brings us closer together. That's all. And so right there, we're sharing a moment. And all it took was 13, maybe 15 seconds after that. Okay, I'm ready. Could have been a big, huge argument right there, right? No, I need to close the casket. Well, I've got a job to do. You can go sit down. You don't know what you're talking about. No. This is their loved one. This is someone that means something to them. So we closed the casket and away we went. Anger. How do you bargain with death? When you're talking about griefs of the stages of grief, when we're talking about, okay, we've done denial and we've done anger, how do you now bargain? How do you make that transition? And you can hear this occasionally when people die. If I wish I woulda, coulda, shoulda. I wish. If only I'd have known. You know the answer to that is? You don't. So treat it as though it's going to happen today, tomorrow, whenever. Don't let things hang out there. Be on your best. Always take the opportunity to do whatever. Don't ever feel like you're going to have some lagging moment of insecurity, doubt, of their love for you or your love for them. It's important. Okay, so I'll just state it that way. Okay. Here on the table down here, the embalming process is a kind of an interesting thing. It started around Civil War time. I hate asking questions because I know you aren't going to answer them. So I'm just going to tell you. So during the Civil War time, they were finding people in caskets. First of all, I'm going to go back and I'm going to define for you a casket and a coffin. Do you know the difference? Coffins were designed in the early 1800s. They're what we call the European style casket, where it looks like a band. It's got the shoulders, points down to the toes. That's the coffin. Caskets were designed in the early 1900s. And they use the term casket because it is a derivative of the French word meaning jewelry box. Does that mean anything more for you now? The casket? Casket, jewelry, something of importance is being placed in that casket. Hopefully they are important to you when that happens. Anyway, so let me go to the slide here, the embalming here. So this right here, and it's just something we pulled off the internet because we need something to show embalming. But this right here is an embalming machine. This is called a duotronic. And so what happens is you fill this tank with a mixture of chemicals, generally formaldehyde, and some water. And then through this hose here that she's holding, there's a cannula is attached to it. The cannula is actually used to actually insert into the vessels to use as a transport for those fluids to enter into the bloodstream. Now, do we have an open or closed blood system, vascular system? Thank you. It is. It's closed. That's wonderful as an embalmer because that means if I have a point of injection right here, there's 14 different points of injection that we as embalmers can use while embalming. But if I can use this one in the entire body, fabulous. Have you ever blown on a long balloon, pinched it in the middle? what happens? Yeah, where your mouth is in that pinch, it starts to expand more and possibly will explode. Same principle occurs when the embalming process is happening. You know if you've got a problem because either hands will swell, arms will swell, necks will swell. And so you just know that there's a problem somewhere, which means that you can't embalm from that point anymore. You got to move to another point. So if they're starting to expand, that tells you right there that either one, you're using way too much pressure on the machine, or there's a blockage somewhere that isn't allowing that fluid to pass. And so you always want the fluid to pass. So as we're looking at the embalming process, there's a cannula here. This right here is an eye cap, and this is usually placed over the eye. And if you, after the lecture, you can come down and look at it, but there's ridges on the eye cap because your eyes are full of humoral fluid. And once that fluid, what keeps your eye round is the heart, is the pressure in your bloodstream. Once that heart stops, there's no more pressure, so your eye sinks. This will rest on the cubit of your eye, which will allow the eye to keep its form. Next time you're in a viewing, go ahead and open the eye. No. And what is that? So yeah, go ahead and take a look at that. Then at the final process of the embalming, there's what's called an aspiration process. And I don't see a trocar here in this picture anywhere, but it's a long hole with a point or a sharp point on the front of it. And it allows the visceral fluid to be extracted from the abdominal and thoracic area. It's usually inserted right here, 2 inches over, 3 inches up from the belly button. And that's where the trocar, or the aspiration process, takes place. Allowing, and if someone dies from kidney failure or liver failure, have you ever seen a distended belly on someone after they've passed away? Man, that takes that fluid just like that. And that's how you know that that individual died from a certain disease. And one of my instructors in college would always say, always treat the individual as though you don't know what killed them, because something put them there. So, I guess as you get older, you just don't take as many precautions as you should. Let me ask you this. Every once in a while, the medical examiner will call and say, in this case, Frank, would you mind embalming a body for us? Okay. Now, why would they ask me to do that? Oh, I'm sorry. We're still in the lecture portion. Sorry. If I don't give a correct answer, or if it's not a good enough answer for you, please ask after. But the reason for it is in homicide cases. If a person is killed like that by a blow to the head or the neck, they want to know what happened and see why do people bruise? I'm sorry. Sorry. Yes, you're right. But I'm sorry. I have to keep asking questions, so that's the way I am.
Okay.
But if you're hit real hard in the arm, and all of a sudden you got what? A bruise, because your heart is pushing blood into broken down tissue. That's what's happening. But if you die immediately, no bruising until you're embalmed. Then the embalming fluid, because of its pressure, takes place of the heart, allowing bruising to show. I'm going to tell you a story about one individual that I'll never forget. And this was the same type thing with an individual that the medical examiner called. The medical examiner, so you know, they authorize autopsies on individuals. And now, why would they authorize an autopsy? Insurance reasons, number one. Number two, they want to determine the cause of death. Or number three, they aren't sure. So they want to open it up and see the internal organs to see what the cause of death may have been. So this particular case was a young lady, probably around 30 years old. And I got a call. This was in California. And they wanted to know if I would just take a moment and embalm her. It's not a moment. It's about an hour and a half, just so you know. And so I did the embalming, and as I was massaging the tissue, as is our like to do, as we embalm, we massage, because that helps circulation. All of a sudden, I got nervous and worried because her right arm started to turn black. I had never seen that before. I'm thinking, why in the world is her arm turning black? Then all of a sudden, splotches started to appear on the left arm, then on her chest, then on her legs. This woman had been beaten to death. And the medical examiner wanted to they knew that, but they just wanted to verify it through the embalming process. Embalming, I think, is becoming a lost art. There is not as much call for embalming as there used to be. And I think it's because of cremation. And like at our facility, we're probably one of the worst because of it. If someone comes to me and says, hey, Frank, we don't want to pay for the embalming, but would you allow us an hour to come in as a family and see her, see him, see our son? Yeah, well, no charge, no embalming. Close the eyes, close the mouth, make them bathe them, make them look presentable. But for that hour, just for family, they have the moment they need. So you don't really need anything else. That, the embalming, because of health statutes, has to be done if it's an open public viewing, where people have access that are not family members that can actually touch, hug, or kiss the deceased. The individual has to be involved. That's a sanitation thing. So it's very interesting when you start traversing the medical field with the mortuary side. And so going back to this picture here, so once the embalming is done, and most chemicals, I was going to bring some chemicals with me, but I neglected. The fluids themselves have a dye in them. And so the dye interacts, depending upon how the individual died, with the body fluids. And that allows an individual to either have a nice complexion, or if you choose wrong, or have the wrong mixture, then it can be horrible. So it's just, it takes experience and a little bit of time. Like say, for instance, this guy, don't want to make, see how gray he looks? You see that? Can you see that? Can you make that out? So if an embalming is done well, there should not be, I don't like to use makeup. I just don't. That's just me. I prefer to do everything in the embalming. So if he is gray here, then it probably has to be covered up with makeup. You can see here livor mortis taking place. His arms. Generally age. Could be abuse, I don't know. Not there. Anyway, that gives you an idea. Let me just take a look. Oh, this right here is the cosmetic case. A lot of families will say, this right here is a cosmetic case, and it has probably 100 different cosmetics in it. Those are designed by funeral companies, which allow you the opportunity to bring that hue out. It's designed to cover someone's face that's passed away. A lot of families will say, hey, we'd like to dress mom. We'd like to do her hair. We want to do her makeup. Okay. So they come in and they do their hair, they do their makeup, they do the dressing, but the makeup just doesn't look right. You know why? When you wear makeup, it's interacting with body heat. That's what it's doing. That allows you to get the complexion you want, but on a deceased individual, there is no body heat. It cakes. The makeup that you use will cake on a deceased individual. Frank, she just doesn't look right. Is there anything you can do? Yeah. So take it 5 minutes. Oh my gosh, she looks wonderful. Okay. There, I'm gonna share with you another little story. And I almost have to Can I get someone to just come up here with me? Just for a second. Come on up. I'm going to be holding your hand for a moment. Do you mind? Oh, yes, you do mind? Okay, sit down. No, I'm kidding. Come on up. Okay, so this just happened and it was such a tender moment for me. Oh my gosh. I could not explain to you, I could not express to you truly what this wife was experiencing. So here it was, her husband had passed away and she had this need to see him. Okay. So you do preparation work and you're going to be him for a moment, okay? So as he's lying on the table, I bring her in. The rest of the family's all around. I come out, Frankie, he looks so good. He looks like she could still be alive. So give me your hand. So I go walking up to her, and I'm going to call her Betty. I say, Betty, are you okay? Because I noticed her doing this. You in the back probably can't see, but she's pinching his finger. I said, are you okay, Betty? She goes, it just looks like he's sleeping. I just want to make sure he's dead. And that just touched me. It said, here, if I got a Kleenex up here, my funeral director should always have Kleenex. Yeah, thank you. So anyway, one of the, I guess, lessons for me is that even after 40 years in this industry, I have always strived to not be callous. I don't want to be callous. I want to be interacting with the living. And so there I was able to finally experience that. And it brought me back to a base where I needed to be. Sometimes we get too hurried in any profession you choose. I don't care what it is. Any profession you choose, if you lose the ability to interact with someone on a human basis, you've lost the ability to interact, to communicate, to feel, to see a need. So just keep that in mind with whatever it is you choose to do. Okay. Some of the other things down here on this table are items that were found or that have been found in individuals that have been cremated. So these are actual pieces, and I welcome you to come down after the lecture to see. But this here's a knee joint. Have you ever heard someone say, oh, it's going to rain, my knees are killing me? Yeah, I wonder why. Look at this is metal, and if it's cold, it gets cold, it's chilly. So anyway, there's that. Femur, hip. This is your hip as well. Long bone. So anyway, there's a number of different things that you need to just be aware of that take place with the embalming. And I'm going to just let me go here, one more step here. Let me go back here. Okay. I'm going to tell you a story. It's kind of funny, but not. And, okay, so 2 stories. The first one. And I think my wife's heard it. I don't know. But my supervising embalmer, his name was Ralph. And he said, Frank, stick by me, you'll see and understand. You will learn so much from me that you won't even know what to do with the knowledge that I'm about to bestow upon you. Okay, all right. So we have this viewing going on, a service. The guy is dressed to the hilt in a tuxedo. And viewing went, there was well over 1,000 people that had come through for the viewing. And he was to be buried the next day. So we were kind of watching the clock and thinking, oh my gosh, they said it was going to end at 9. Here it is, 9:45. You ever felt like that sometime? Oh my gosh, when can I get off this shift? I was supposed to be home an hour ago. Now that feeling? So 9:45, 10 o'clock rolls around, daughter comes up. And she says, hey, Ralph, my supervisor, we have one request for you if you could handle it for us, and I know it's going to be an odd one. but we'd like you to undress my father. And I'm looking at Ralph and I'm thinking, are you going to allow that to happen? You know, I'm thinking to myself, you know, well, okay. He says, okay. Now, mind you, it's just me, Ralph, 2 sons, and a daughter. And so we walk over to the casket and he starts, Frank, just follow my lead. So what do? Undo the tie, undo the shirt, fold them a little bit, take the shirt off, undo the pants, take the pants off, and remove his shoes, his underwear. And so we fold the tuxedo and we hand it to the family, and the family says, thank you, there's one more request. Oh, okay. They said, we'd like you to turn my dad over on his belly, and then we'd like you to remove his underwear. And now I'm looking at Ralph thinking, surely you're not going to do this. We did it. We rolled him over onto his belly and we removed all the underwear, the undershirt, and the underpants. So once that was done, Ralph looks at the family and says, is there any other requests? She says, no, that should do it. Can we close the casket? Yes, close the casket. So we close the casket and we start walking out, and the daughter looks at Ralph and he says, and she says to him, he says, I'm sure you think that's an odd request. And Ralph, bless his heart, he said, oh no, we get requests like this all the time. We don't. It was a lie, out and out lie. And I'm looking at him, and then the son, the oldest son, pulls us aside and he said, and I'll never forget this, because for me, it's a blight to what children will do to parents or parents to children. And this is what he said to us. And this man was very wealthy. I'm not going to hold that. I mean, seriously wealthy. And he said, you're probably asking why we're having this done. And Ralph said, no, not really. It happens all the time. And we didn't want an explanation. Sure. He said, well, I think I owe you an explanation. He said, my father expected people to kiss his ass when he was old. So why should his death be any different? Think about that for just a moment. Think about that comment. Think about what they asked us to do, yet we were able to go ahead and abide by the request. We may not have understood the request, but the comment kind of left me vacant, empty. And so what do you do with people like that? What do you do with requests like that? And like I said, tells from a mortician right from the beginning, you're going to hear, I could bend your ear for hours, right? On different stories that have taken place and what does take place. Okay, second story. A young man decided it was time to kill himself. So he took his dog and he loaded his truck up and drove off a canyon, off a cliff. Yeah. And so good news was, dog survived. Yeah, right, good. So the family goes on ahead and they make arrangements for him to be cremated. And then they said, can we put his dog with him? And I looked at him and I said, I thought you said the dog survived. Yeah, we're going to put him down. And I thought, and I'm just thinking to myself, what the heck? I said, I guess you can, but we won't cremate him. You'll have to have a pet crematory cremated, then you can bring us the pet cremated remains. That's exactly what they did. They had a perfectly good, healthy dog put down because he was in the truck with their son. And they thought that that's what he wanted. Can you see what goes on in my mind on a daily basis? And so you just begin to wonder and begin to think, oh my gosh, what more could happen? So here we have an old cemetery. I love cemeteries. There's one of my most favorite places on earth. You know, I have a friend, or had a friend, he has since passed away, named Gary. Kind of a big man. But it was interesting. When I asked Gary directions on anything, he would say, just a minute, do you know where the Wendy's is on the corner of? Just a minute, do you know where the IHOP is on the corner of? Everything was related to restaurants. That told me all I needed to know about Gary. But if someone asked me, do you know where the funeral home is on the corner of? Hold it, do you know where the cemetery is on the corner of? You see what's happening? You experience what you experience. You decide how you're going to go ahead and live your life and be what it is that you want to be. I find that interesting, and that's why I like cemeteries. The other thing I like about, which I don't go into, and I'm going to make this a little more personal and more than I wanted to, but when I embalm, I believe that individual is still with me. So I like to look at the face and I try and imagine what they went through in their life. I can look at crow's feet. I can look at blotches on their skin, scars. And I just keep thinking, I wonder what you experienced in life that you could have taught me. That's why I like funerals, because I learn about the individual that's passed away. So I look at that, and here's another thing you're going to think I'm crazy about. But in my cooler, in the cooler at the funeral home, doesn't matter if I have 20, 30, whoever, whatever in the cooler, I will go in and address every single one of them every morning by name. Hey, Peter, how you doing? Just letting you know I'm still around. We're still working on getting things done for you. Susan, how are things going for you? Oh, you're still feeling a little, that's not weird to you. But I don't want, if they are continually living, I don't want a bad vibe in the building. And if my willingness to go in and address them by name helps, then that's what I do. So anyway, in my own mind, that's what's happening. Okay, let's continue on. Okay. Before I get to that slide, there's I think there's two stories I want to share with you, and I'll end with these. And I'm sharing these because I want you to understand my belief that I believe there's more than this life, and I believe there's always indications about, if we look further, about something that's going on after we leave this life. First story. A woman comes in. It's her husband that's passed away. His favorite bird is a hummingbird and a cardinal. So she's in there making arrangements for her husband. He ends up being cremated, getting back to cremated or me. She comes in and she's teary. She's crying. She goes, Frank, you wouldn't believe what just happened to me. And I said, I don't know, I'm trying. What happened? She goes, when I got out of the house this morning, a hummingbird hummed or flew right in front of my face and just sat there and hovered right in front of my face. How many of you, by show of hands, have ever seen a cardinal? Well, more than once. I'm not talking to the football team. All right, okay. So anyway, so as she's driving to my place, she says she stops at a light, and there in front of her car flies a car. She said, what are the odds of that? Do you think Bill is watching over me? Do you think he's watching out for me? I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that everything happens for a reason. So I looked at Sharon and I said, absolutely I do. Yes, I do. And you should too, because you experienced both this morning. On her way to pick up his cremated remains. Story number 2. Oh man, I got to kind of share with you the layout of a mortuary in which I was doing the embalming. So there's an embalming room, and it's in the back side of the building, but on the front side of the building is a chapel and a viewing room. That particular night, there was a viewing going, a service going. and keep the doors locked. There's a U shape or a horseshoe shape that goes around the building, and the embalming room is right at the top of the horseshoe. So I'm finishing the embalming, and this is a little crippled girl, probably 12 years old, that's crippled from birth, didn't have much of a life, could never communicate with anyone. And I finish the embalming, and I sit down and start doing my paperwork. And I hear this little pitter patter of feet down the back hallway. And I'm thinking, what the world? And I'm kind of under my breath cursing those working the viewing, thinking you didn't lock the doors. And so I closed the door, and I just thought, well, they'll just pass by. And once the door's closed, they can't open it because it locks. So I continue back to my paperwork, and all of a sudden I'm hearing it again. Little pitter patter of feet walking and skipping down the hallway. So I thought, okay, I'm going to put a stop to it. Open the door. No one is there. There's nothing there. I walk the hallway. There's nothing. There's no sign of anyone. So what was I hearing? I wasn't quite sure. So I just thought, well, if it happens again, I'm going to leave this door open and continue doing my paperwork because I want to go home. And so I turn my back, writing my paperwork, and all of a sudden I hear the footsteps again. This time I'm thinking to myself, gotcha. So I set the pen down, pivot around, and standing in the doorway is this little girl. And I said, you're not allowed back here. You need to go back to your parents. Without hesitation, without question, she walks right up to the table that I had just finished embalming a young lady. And she says this, I look beautiful. I was shocked. And I thought to myself, what did I just experience? What have I just seen? And so trying to gather my thoughts and feelings together before I knew it, she was gone. And so I explained that experience to the family. And they said, that sounds just like she would have sounded if she could talk. She was so lovey-dovey, and she always wanted to touch people and always wanted to feel them, touch their skin, face, and be a part of them that way. A month ago, I was in a home picking up a loved one, a lady that had just died. Her husband had dementia and was suffering from dementia. And so when I got into the house, they immediately escorted him out of the room where his wife was laying, put him in a side room. And the caregiver said, we don't want him witnessing you moving her from the bed to the gurney or the stretcher. I said, okay, it's okay. And while I was doing that, I would hear an occasional beep. I said, what's the beep? Well, they had a baby monitor that was watching him. And there was his son went into the room with him to just kind of monitor and watch him so that he was okay, but he would continue watching TV. And so whenever he would move, there would be a beep on this little monitor. And so I got used to the beep. And I had just moved this lady from the bed to the gurney. And I hear, oh my gosh, look at this. Oops. She called me over and she said, look at this, Frank, have you ever seen anything like this? I said, truthfully, not like this, but I have seen something similar. And she goes, I think that's my mom. Now look, this is his son, right here. And the daughter yells, Blake, Blake, who's in the room with you? And he yells back, my dad. Here he is. Dementia. What is that? I have my ideas. But I just want you to know that That beep ended almost as soon as that picture was taken. It was gone. The daughter said, I think that was my mom saying goodbye to my dad. Take it with what you will. Believe what you want to believe. But now we're going back to the beginning. Remember stages of grief? Acceptance, hope. Don't you want the hope? That's essentially what she was saying to the rest of her family, her brother, her other sister. There's hope. That's my mom. You can't convince me otherwise. That is my mom saying goodbye to my dad. I agree with her. That's just me. I agree with her. Okay. So we go here. This is a bumper sticker that my daughter found on a car. And I found it very apropos for tonight. And it's this. You don't get out of this life. You don't have to worry about this part here. You probably should. But this right here is what's the truth. 10 of 10 will die. You aren't getting out of this life alive. There's no way. It's the plan. It's the design of the human body. We're born to die. So I find that very interesting. I love that. Oh, and then you die right at the very top. So I put that on there because I think it's important for you to understand that you need to strive to do everything you can in your life. Everything. Everything you want to do, everything you want to accomplish, do it. But then you die. There's no getting around it. There's no bypassing it. Nothing is going to stop you from dying. So live your life to its fullest. Do what you want to do. Do what makes you happy. Be the person you want to be, not what someone's expecting you to be. Be who you want to be. And so with that, I hope that before you leave, I have these coffins made up that says it's a keychain and then you die. Just as a reminder about what we've talked about tonight. On the back side is our information. Thank you. Marketing. I'll be honest with you. It's marketing. But if you want to take one, please do. And I just want to turn some time, if it's okay, for questions. If you have any questions about what we've talked about tonight, or anything that you may have seen during a funeral, or had any questions about the death or passing of someone, let me know. Go ahead in the back. Your hand went up first.
When you
No, sorry.
So, have you ever had anyone who, like, when they were married, wanted to like have a tree, something planted with them?
I-
Stream. They want
Okay, so this is brand new. Now, there are those types of things where you can actually have a tree planted in honor of your loved one. But what I'm about to tell you is something brand new. And that is, it's called a forever living tree. And so once that tree is placed, and the person has to be cremated, but the fertilization that is mixed with those cremated remains, the tree is actually planted into it. And then the tree, through its root system, pulls those cremated remains into its trunk and becomes a living being once again. So that's the purpose of that living tree. So yeah, thank you for the question. It does happen. You can either have the burial take place and then just, like some people will place a tree in their yard in honor of the person that's passed away. And then you just watch it. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that tree's 10 years old. But this one here allows you to actually have some of the cremated remains sucked up into the tree. Okay.
When we started in California.
When did I start?
In California.
When did I start?
When we started working for like.
Okay, in 1981. Actually, hold on a second. I graduated in 85, so what have you been? Probably 84. Yeah, and it was Fairhaven Memorial Park. Any other questions? Someone else had a hand. Go ahead.
Like, you put some in the tombstone, do you want to talk about the
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't go into that, but yes, if they're in a casket, and if it's a wooden casket, the entire thing is consumed. We don't remove individuals from caskets or metal, unless it's a metal casket, then we'll pull the individual from the metal casket. If there would, yeah. And I burnt cherries, mahoganies. Oh. Beautiful caskets. Beautiful caskets just to be put under flame. It's kind of a shame. But yes, the entire thing. Go ahead.
Or the places are new places.
Another good question. It's all recyclable. Yeah. So these items here, the basic material is titanium. And so it's just put into a recycling bin and then it's taken to a metals recycling place. That's where it's melted down again and reused. Yeah. Sorry.
What's the maximum amount of like time you can wait before mold?
I think it all depends on how they die. So drowning victims, not so fast. If you could embalm someone that had drowned within 6 hours of being recovered, that's best. Because this, okay, I'm getting a little graphic for just a moment, but I don't like drowning or burn victims because they're so hard to work with. Embalming, it will help, but it doesn't cure. So when you drown, the skin absorbs the water. And so when you move them, that skin sloughs off. And so it just becomes harder and harder. Burn victims, everything's charred. And so, the state of rigor, that becomes a permanent state. Rigor mortis is a temporary thing, but if you are burned to death, it's permanent because of the acid that's been pushed into the tissue. So you have to break bones and stuff like that in order to get them to look kind of normal. Okay. So yeah, but on a normal case, 30 days. Go ahead. What? They not feel like, yeah. Okay, anytime there's a procedure done on a human body that
They take the eyes off.
I'm sorry. Yeah, for those of you that I'm thinking, I heard the question. Okay, no, but so she's asking about removal of eyes. So anytime we are asked to do something, we have to have it in writing that it's okay by the family for us to do that. But we do that. We do it for research reasons. A lot of research can be done off the eye. Same with bone. So, but it's called, what are they called? Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot the word. Mutilation. They term it as mutilation. And so anytime you're doing anything other than the regular process of embalming, you have to get something signed by the families so they know that what it is you're doing. Go ahead. Yes. Yes, long bone, skin, any of the organs, internal organs. Yeah. The question was, can you remove the brain for research? And of course, you heard the answer that anything can be used for research from the human body. Go ahead.
So like she was saying for the research brains, is that somebody who might have been or an organ donor? Something like, would that be that type of situation?
That's correct.
That wasn't the question, but I just thought about that.
Yeah.
What I did want to find out was there was a funeral that I attended some years ago,
Mhm.
and they had problems with the insurance, so they couldn't bury them yet, but they wanted to have a service. So once they got the insurance taken care of, they ended up having a funeral, open casket, but it had been 3 months. Maybe not 3 months, but it was a very long time
No, it probably
because it was
3 months.
it was an odor.
Yeah.
So is that can happen if they've been, I guess, in the morgue that long,
Okay,
and
I'm
then
going to tell you something point blank, and I like to be frank with people. My name is Frank.
okay.
Uh-huh. So I'm going to tell you this from my perspective. Shame on that mortuary.
They shouldn't even allow
They
that.
should not have.
Thank
No,
you.
no. They
Oh,
should not have held the body
Oh.
until they were paid. Shame on them for doing that. They should have allowed that family to go ahead and have their funeral. Have the funeral. Then you can put the casket and the individual under refrigeration. No one's the wiser. But if you're making them wait for the 3 months until payment is made,
yeah, that's what. And then my other question was, is a friend of mine, her husband, he went from like 170 pounds. When he died, he was like 90 pounds.
Yeah.
And she was under the impression that once he was, because she wanted to have an open casket,
Mhm.
but then once they embalmed him, she was under the impression, I don't know who told her this, that the embalming would make him look like he was at 100. And that's not possible.
No,
Okay.
it isn't. The embalming can do a lot, and there's tissue fillers that we can use and do use, but it won't increase someone by 170
No,
pounds.
and that's because when she told me somebody told her that, I was like, I don't think so.
No, because when you have sunken
Okay.
temples or sunken eyes.
Yeah, and that's
Sunken cheeks,
right.
those can all be built and worked on, but yeah, the torso,
Yeah,
no.
okay, which I figured.
Yeah, but thank you. Thanks for the question. That's great. Oh, don't forget.
I've got a quick question and a not so quick question. Was that 1800 degrees Fahrenheit or centigrade?
Fahrenheit.
And second, more complicated one is, do you see a social economic division on who chooses to cremate versus burial?
Yes,
And is it large, small, or,
it's tremendous. The gap is huge.
well, it's mostly for financial reasons that people choose cremation.
Yeah, and since you brought that up, I should have brought it up in the presentation, but whenever you look for burial of a casket and a human being, from the mortuary to the cemetery, you're probably looking at $12,000, maybe 20,000, depending upon the cemetery that you choose to use. Whereas cremation with burial, 2,300,
God.
maybe 2,400. So there's that price discrepancy, and you're right. And that's probably and that's why people pay with insurance.
Yeah.
Because they want to make sure that they do what they feel is best for their loved one. And this is the other thing that I'm going to just tell you right off. And if you, the last funeral you went to, can you tell me what casket the person was in?
It was nice. It was black. It was.
Okay, everyone except her. Anyone? Anyone? No.
It
No,
was.
yeah, I'll tell you what. Most times you cannot tell me what the casket was. You just can't. But what's the biggest expense of the funeral? The casket. Why would you pay something? Why would you pay, me speaking, $23,000, $3,000, $5,000, $7,000, $9,000 for a casket, a jewelry box?
Did you never
No
go
one
see it again?
remembers.
My parents
sir.
went and looked at theirs.
What's that?
My parents went and looked at theirs. They're still living, but my mom and dad, they went and looked at theirs. My mom is a singer. So
Oh,
she looked at one that had music notes all over it. My
that's the other
dad,
thing
he
too.
just,
Don't think that you're limited by our standards today. Anything you did in life, we can accommodate.
but
And it's really quite amazing, truthfully. If you look, you can find it. So, yeah, so.
I mean,
No, so if they're an organ donor, so the question is, organ donors, does that happen at the funeral home? Does it happen at the hospital? No. There are organ donation companies and organizations that will actually either go to the hospital and do the extraction there, or they'll take them to their facility and do the extraction there. It does not, however, stop you from having a viewing. A lot of people are under the impression that if, they're an organ donor, so we can't do anything with a funeral. That's not true. We can do a lot. Go ahead.
In your opinion, do you feel like today's society is more separated from that versus almost that like, do you think today there's more of a veil around it?
Did everyone hear the question? So in my opinion, is there more of a separation between how we treat death today than we did years ago? Fair? Okay. Yes, there is. I think we're in a society that's disposable. That's the way the funeral industry has become. We're a disposable society. Oh, this microphone's no longer working. See that? Oh, these glasses are no longer fitting me. You're quite right. I'll just get another pair. Oh, this blasted phone. It's no longer working. I think I'll get another one. Right? Everything. Why is any different? It isn't. So yes, there was great care in the way individuals took care of their loved ones when they passed away years ago. Not so much today. Go ahead, I'm sorry. I don't want to wake your baby. Go ahead.
Kind of gnarly, so I apologize in advance. Cases of multiple compound fractures and like the fracture.
Hold on one second, I'm just. Say your questions. Go ahead.
Oh no, okay, hello. In cases, where you have multiple compound fractures and like the peripheral limbs and stuff, how do you address embalming in that case? Do you have like to have an osteology consult to put the bones back together in case there's circulatory obstruction? Or do you just kind of like snap them back into place, sew up the arm, and then see if the embalming fluid will find a solid path through the limbs?
Everyone hear that? We pull, we tug, we tuck, we sew. That's exactly what we do. And so in answer to your question, if that arm or that leg doesn't get embalmed, we raise a vessel in that extremity in order to embalm it. So it doesn't, like we said earlier, it's a closed vascular system. If there's a breakage somewhere, we'll know. So we raise the vessel that's closest to the break and then embalm that way.
You guys also, you said you sew and stuff, so you guys will sew the skin and you'll sew the vascular like damage too?
That is correct. Yeah, we do a lot of sewing. I mean, my thumbs suffer because of. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like back in the 1800s, there was more mass graves and stuff.
Yeah.
They used to have like the guy go around on the cart and pick up the dead bodies. So I feel like,
Bring out your dead.
yeah, I feel like it's I guess it can go either ways on how we treat our dead people.
So let me go back to that for just a second. And do you know why individuals started to embalm?
I cannot say no.
Because they were afraid of burying people alive. It's true. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
that's exactly
the
right. Bell ringers.
Yeah.
And so people would exhume caskets. And what would they find on the inside of the casket? Scratch marks. So someone was buried alive. So not only does the embalming preserve a body, doesn't stop the decomposition process, but it will preserve the body for a temporary period of time. It also secures death. So anyway, and I would know if I was an embalmer and opened up a vascular system, I would know immediately if the person was alive or dead. I'm going to share one more story having said that.
Oh my
What's that? No. So this, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so embarrassed by telling you this story. And this, you have to understand, happened years ago. Maybe even before I was in the funeral industry. No, I'm kidding you. So I was called one night in California, late night, probably about 1:15, 1:20 in the morning, to go to a care facility called the Barn. And the Barn is a series of 4 different retirement homes or assisted living places that are designed like barns.
Here's what I found.
And so when you would walk in this particular barn, there would be rooms on the right, rooms on the left. In the center of the barn would be the nurse's station. So I went in and I said, I'm here to pick up Mrs. Burroughs. Okay, she's in room 7, bed B. Now, the thing they don't tell you is that when you go into the room, there's 4 beds. So is bed B A, B, or is it A, B? See the problem I'm having right now? So when you go into the room and then to assisted living places, that time of night, everyone looks like this.
Oh.
Okay? So I went to bed B. I thought it was bed B. Pulled her over onto the gurney, signed my paperwork, headed back to the mortuary. We had approval to go ahead and embalm her. I was the embalmer all that night. So sure, I'm gonna embalm her while I get back. Put her on the embalming table, which is a stainless steel table. And I had this fear of my life when she said, "Oh, that's cool." I hurried and called the nurse and I said, I think I picked up I think I was just getting ready to call you. This will be our secret.
Oh my God.
So now you know. Yeah, now it's all over. Oh my gosh. Any other questions? Go ahead. Okay, so green burials are interesting. You have to find a cemetery that will allow it because most cemeteries now require a vault, which defeats the the green burial purpose. Because with the green burial, you don't want anything, you want the body to decompose and go right into the ground without obstruction. The vault creates that obstruction. So here in Arizona, you will never, ever, unless you're Muslim, have a true green burial. So you have to get permission from the cemetery in order for it to happen. Most cemeteries here will say, no, we won't accommodate that. Do you know why? Cemeteries take shapes of the individuals that are buried there. That's why they require vaults. So it keeps the cemetery nice and level. But if you allow a green burial, all of a sudden, when that body's decomposing, that earth's going to start sinking. And so you get a little dip. And then they know. So that's why they don't push for green burials here too often. Unless you're Muslim, and then they have their own cemetery. And that's what it's designed for. Thank you. Anything else?
I have another question. With all us becoming the me generation, do you find more people coming in and pre-planning their funerals and picking their caskets so they have musical designs? Or is this something where most people still, when the person dies, and people start thinking about the burial process?
It's funny when you say the me generation, because I look at it as another way. People will come in and do that, but the me generation, once your father or your mother pass away, they'll say, how much was that policy for? And what did it include? And so they'll say, can we take away the casket? Can we take away the vault? Can we get the money back from the cemetery? Me generation. Can we just do a simple cremation and get the money back? Yeah. So regardless of what your wishes may be, you may have progenitors that will say, nope, that's not what we want. We want the money.
My dad told us, he said, don't put no money in the ground. Yeah, that all the time. He's like, don't put no money in the ground.
All right.
I'm like, okay, Dad. So if anybody
Thank you.
sees me crying, I'm not crying like, believe me, my dad's still kicking. He ain't going nowhere.
How old is your dad?
He'll be 86 and
Oh
all.
my gosh, bless his heart. Bless his heart. Any other questions? Go ahead.
So, again, this is kind of, but so that, the eye thing that. The eye thing, I forgot what it's called, I'm sorry, iPad. How, do you have alternative methods in extreme cases of like where enucleation occurred, for example, like high voltage electrocution and stuff? Do you have another formula to figure out where exactly the depth of the eye originally will have been, like you were showing us, like doing the finger measurements? You have a different formula to do that in cases?
Yeah.
That-
I did. And so, just so you know, the question was, did you hear it? Like in electrocution cases, electricity will exit one place of the body. It's usually the heel, sometimes the eye. If it's the eye, it's only one eye. So I still have the other eye to work with. That's what happens. Anything else? Oh, okay. I'll come right back to you. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I wanted to ask you, is working in your profession hard to get into? Or how many years of school or such did you go to?
So I was different. I had close to 5 years of college before I went into the mortuary science program. Mortuary science here in Arizona only requires a 2-year degree. And you could probably step into it. I don't think there's got to be some prerequisites, but it's nothing like, yeah. 2 years is what I would guess you could do here in Arizona. And most other places. I mean, California's was only 2 years as well. Anything else?
Where in California? Where you?
Hold on, wait just one second.
Oh.
Let me get her question first, do you mind? Okay, go ahead, thank you. Go ahead. Pressure.
I wanted to ask you, what was the general, you mentioned this kind of before, you said that death is something less special.
Yeah.
I wanted to
I wanted to ask what you see mostly. My father told me, you know, when I die, put me in a closet. Cremate me, put me in a closet. I'm good. I don't need a funeral. And then my mother, she tells me, when I die, you're crying. Everybody's crying. It's not a celebration of life. I died, you know? Put me in the ground. I want a nice casket, blah, 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 all that, all that. So I grew up with a pretty warped concept of death. I don't know how my funeral's gonna be. But yes, the overall question is, between those two perspectives, like complete 180 from each other, which do you see the most? Or do you see sort of like a middle ground?
So there are legalities that have to be addressed when someone passes away. We can't just tuck them in a corner. And families, did you guys see, I think it was here in Arizona where someone had in their front room, a person that had passed away over 8 months. And they were on they were on the chair, on the recliner.
She got cremated in the closet.
You meant cremated in the closet, sorry, but we'll get back to that. So, but anyway, no, they have that opportunity to go ahead and, man alive, they couldn't do anything to her. Yeah, because as the law is written, so long as the body is eventually disposed of, which she eventually did, even though the body had sat in her house for 8 months, cremation. Yes, people will put them on a shelf and just leave them. I have a cupboard full of 50. Just so you know, I have 50 cremated remains in our mortuary, maybe a little more, right now, waiting for families just to decide what they're going to do. And you know what? I'll tell you what. I'll bet all 50 forget. I'll bet not one of them will come back for their loved one. I'm responsible and required to cook them for 90 days, but I will keep them until I either sell the business or die. Because you never know when someone's going to say, "Oh my gosh, remember when we looked at over that? What's the name of that mortuary?" Yeah, yeah. So anyway, any others? Go ahead.
How do you want to be buried?
How do I want to be buried? It's funny because a family asked me the same question, and I had never really thought about it. And you know, even though I work in the industry every single day, I think we're kind of leaning towards cremation. Maybe I think my wife wants to be buried, but I wouldn't mind being cremated. And it really wouldn't bother me whatever their decisions were. So I could go either way. I guess it doesn't really matter to me. So, but thank you for that question. Now I gotta think about it again. She's gonna mention it on the way home, I'm sure. Okay. Yeah. Oh, one more question is all? Okay, hold it. I got it right here. Go ahead.
How did you get over that? How did you handle them?
Okay, there's a lot more than that. Just so you know. And when you say creeped out, I think you just keep going. You just have to keep going and you just put it behind you. You learn from it and just say, okay, there are other forces out there that what I may not be aware of. That's all. And then you just keep going and say, if I see it again, great. Another one, another story, another entry in my journal, another story to write, book, whatever. So it's very, yeah, there's a lot. Anyway. Thank you all very, very much for allowing me to come in. I hope that you learned something tonight and that you won't look at each other as though you're just passing by. Take the time to interact. Thanks.